My cousin threw his daughter out without a second thought the moment she turned 18, and that's when I stepped in and brought her to live with us, what she ended up sharing in front of the whole family. It completely blew the lid off everything. We're talking decades of lies unraveled in a heartbeat. So, my wife, she's 27, and I'm 30, live out on a seriously massive farm. And I mean massive. We've got 5 bedrooms, 3 full baths, and something like 300 acres of land to roam. We even outfitted the place with electric hookups for RVs and campers. Our whole vision was to create this sort of home base for the family. You know, the kind of place people can return to every summer or during the holidays. We built it with that idea in mind, hoping it'd become the go-to spot for gatherings. Kind of like how some families just naturally end up congregating at one person's house. That's what we were going for, and for a while, it worked beautifully. When summer hit, we had cousins, uncles, aunts, you name it, piling into the house, hanging around the bonfire, and parking their campers all across the open fields. Kids would be running wild, people swapping stories under the stars. It felt like the heartbeat of our entire extended family. Among that crowd was my cousin John. He's 56 now and has been a regular at these get-togethers for as long as I can remember. He'd always bring his kids along, including his daughter Grace, who just turned 18. She's from his first marriage. Grace's mom was an immigrant who didn't have any family here. And tragically, she passed away when Grace was only 2 years old. Really tough start for a kid. John didn't stay single long. He remarried 6 months later. His new wife, Sophie, she's 52 now. Together, they had 3 more kids. And that house of theirs? It runs on a completely different vibe. Everything seems to revolve around the 2 older boys and their youngest daughter, the ones John and Sophie had together. Grace, though, you'd swear she was a ghost in that house. I mean, I'm not exactly a genius, but even I can see she's constantly sidelined. It's like she's just there existing. They take their kids on trips, sign them up for sports and camps, celebrate milestones. Meanwhile, Grace gets none of that. No travel, no clubs, nothing that costs them money or attention. She's left to manage on her own. And listen, I've seen her grow up right in front of me. She's been spending her summers at our place for the last 4 years. I always figured John and Sophie sent her over just to get her out of their way. They'd constantly talk about how she's difficult or how she needs to learn respect. I'm not saying she's an angel. Far from it, but come on, it's obvious she's just desperate for someone to notice her. She acts out, sure, but there's always a reason behind that kind of behavior. Now, don't get me wrong. Grace can be a real firecracker. She's got that typical teenager energy, you know? Like she's carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, but hiding it under this loud, defiant front. She's not afraid to throw down in a screaming match with Sophie. And most of the time, it's over the dumbest little things, doors slammed, swearing storms, the whole 9 yards. You probably think, wow, what a brat. And yeah, sometimes it really comes off that way. But if you dig just a little deeper, it becomes clear this behavior didn't come out of nowhere. It started when she realized she was never going to get the same treatment as her siblings. And here's what gets me. When she's not at home, she's completely different. With us, with her teachers, even just chatting with strangers. She's calm, respectful, keeps to herself. But the moment she steps back into that house, boom, it's like a switch flips. Honestly, it's like watching 2 entirely different people. There's the Grace the world sees, and then there's the Grace who's just trying to survive in that house. No wonder she's angry. And John and Sophie? They're totally blind to it. They act like everything is great with their kids, and Grace is just the black sheep they've been cursed with. Not once do they stop and ask themselves, hey, are we maybe part of the problem? Anyway, she started helping out on our farm a few summers back, mostly because her parents wanted her out of their way. But let me tell you, she's not half bad at the work. When she's got a task, she really locks in. She's awesome with the animals, can fix a busted fence like nobody's business. And she's even picked up some basic mechanical skills. I think being here gives her a little breathing room, a break from the chaos. We didn't mind having her around. In fact, we liked it. She was learning, pitching in, becoming part of something real. And this summer, things took a serious turn. Her 18th birthday was coming up, and I had a gut feeling it was going to be rough. John had been running his mouth for months, saying once she hit 18, she was outdone on her own. He kept saying it would teach her responsibility, but all I could think was, really, man? That's your parenting plan? No safety net, no backup. Just toss her out and hope she figures it out? We sat Grace down a few times to talk things over, and you could tell she was scared. She had no plan, no place to go. And John wasn't bluffing, he meant it. So my wife and I decided if it came down to it, We'd take her in, we had plenty of space, and more importantly, we cared. Why not give her a shot at building something stable? Maybe help her get into college, or find a job, or just learn how to breathe a little. She deserved at least that much. The night before her birthday, she came over for dinner, barely touched her plate, eyes kind of glazed over like she wasn't even really there. My wife tried to ask her about what she wanted to do after graduation, and all Grace could manage was a shrug. She didn't know, and honestly, how could she? No one had helped her plan for anything. Later that night, after she'd gone to bed, my wife and I stayed up talking. We knew taking her in might stir the pot with the rest of the family. But at the same time, what were we supposed to do? Just leave her hanging? To me, it felt like standing on the shore, watching someone drowning, and choosing to look the other way, and I just couldn't do that. Neither of us could. It felt like she was drowning, and we finally had the chance to toss her a life preserver. So that was it. We made up our minds. The next morning, we hopped in my truck and headed over to get her out of there. Grace looked stunned when we pulled into the driveway, just after sunrise. I think she had prepared herself to get thrown out, but not for someone to actually show up for her. We packed her things, just what she personally owned or had been gifted over the years. I wasn't about to touch anything John or Sophie could later claim wasn't hers. The whole time, Grace barely said a word. She looked like she didn't quite believe what was happening, like she was afraid it would all come crashing down at any moment. But once we were a few miles down the road, she finally spoke. "Thanks," she whispered, soft, like she was still testing if it was okay to say it out loud. It wasn't just gratitude in her voice. It was relief, like someone had finally taken a 10-ton weight off her back. I didn't say anything profound, just told her we were happy to have her with us. Honestly, it felt like the only thing we could do. We weren't trying to be heroes or anything. We just saw someone who needed a hand. And if you've got the means to help, why wouldn't you? That was the beginning of everything shifting for all of us. Of course, that's when things started to get complicated. Once we got her moved in and settled, things began to shift pretty quickly. At first, it was smooth sailing. She was quiet, probably trying to figure out what this new life was supposed to look like. We set her up in one of the guest rooms, gave her space, her own bathroom, and as much privacy as she wanted. We didn't want her to feel like she was a guest on borrowed time. We wanted her to feel at home. We told her there was no deadline, no pressure to sort her whole life out right away. Just breathe. Now, let me be honest. I don't have kids. I'm not going to pretend like I know the first thing about raising a teenager, especially one who's been through the emotional ringer. But I do know enough to understand that years of being ignored and pushed aside don't just disappear overnight. Trauma doesn't pack up and leave just because you change locations. So we gave her time. We didn't push her to open up, but we made sure she knew she could whenever she was ready. Those first few days, she kept mostly to herself. She'd show up for meals, help out around the farm when we asked. But outside of that, quiet, distant. I figured she was still trying to process everything. And really, can you blame her? One day, she's being kicked to the curb by her own dad. And the next, she's living in a strange new place with people who, let's face it, she barely knew beyond summer visits. That's a big shift for anyone, let alone a kid like Grace. My wife, though, she's got this way of making people feel welcome without trying too hard. She started small, left little snacks out for Grace, stocked her bathroom with everything a teenage girl might need, even surprised her with a little TV for her room. Her way of saying, "You belong here, we see you." And little by little, it worked. Grace started coming out of her shell, just a bit. She began pitching in with the animals without waiting to be asked, started joining us at dinner with a small smile here and there. It wasn't dramatic, but it was something progress. Now, I wish I could say that everything stayed calm and easy after that. But of course, that's when John and Sophie caught wind of the situation. Didn't take long either. Word spreads fast in families, especially ours, where people are constantly dropping by or calling check-in. In a farm like ours, always a revolving door. A couple days after Grace moved in, I got a call from John. I picked up, and right away I could tell. He wasn't calling for a friendly chat. No, hey, how's it going? No catching up, just straight to the point. What's this I hear about Grace living with you? His tone was already loaded, accusatory, like I'd pulled some kind of stunt behind his back. I didn't bother sugarcoating it. Yeah, she's here. You told her she had to leave once she turned 18, and she had nowhere else to go, so we figured we'd help her out. He let out this long, heavy sigh. One of those theatrical ones that's more about expressing frustration than breathing. You know that's not helping her, he said. We were trying to teach her responsibility. And man, that got under my skin. I'm not usually one to get into it over the phone, but that rubbed me the wrong way. I did my best to stay calm. Look, John, I get that parenting's not easy. but throwing your kid out with no plan? That's not teaching responsibility. That's abandonment. She's still a kid, man. She needs support, not punishment. But he wouldn't hear it. She's not your responsibility. He snapped. She's mine. You think you're doing her a favor, but you're just getting in the way of what we were trying to teach her. At that point, I could feel my patience starting to fray. Well, if teaching her responsibility means leaving her out to dry with no plan and no support, then yeah, I guess I am getting in the way of that. And I'll keep doing it. As long as she's here, she's safe, and she's welcome. That's what I told him, plain and simple. But trying to talk sense into John felt like arguing with a wall. He just kept hammering the same lines over and over, how it was his job to raise her, how we were stepping out of line, how we didn't understand what was best for her. Eventually, I just cut him off. Look, man, she's here, and she's staying as long as she wants to. If you got a problem with that, I don't know what to tell you. He hung up without another word. And that's when I knew we hadn't seen the last of it. Sure enough, the next day my phone lit up, calls, texts, people checking in. Turns out John and Sophie had already started working the family grapevine, spinning the story like we stole Grace from them. Now they were telling everyone they wouldn't be coming to family events if she was around. It felt like a gut punch. We'd always been the ones to host holidays, birthdays, summer barbecues. There was always a spot at our table. And now, because we gave a kid a safe place to land, we were suddenly the problem. My wife was furious and hurt. She pours everything into making people feel welcome. She's the one who remembers your favorite dessert, who sets out extra chairs just in case someone brings a friend. So to have people turn on us like that, it cut deep. Then Aunt Linda called. She tried to play the neutral party, but I could hear the caution in her voice. You know, she said, it's not that they don't appreciate what you're doing. It's just they feel like maybe you're stepping in where you shouldn't. John and Sophie have their ways of doing things. I didn't have the patience for sugarcoating. Aunt Linda, I'm not trying to start a feud, but Grace had nowhere to go, and we had the room. I'm not going to kick her out just to keep the peace. She sighed, I get it, I do, but maybe if Grace stayed somewhere else, like a dorm or an apartment, it might be easier. That way John and Sophie wouldn't feel like you were choosing sides. I didn't even know what to say to that. It was clear everyone was more worried about keeping John and Sophie happy than actually doing right by Grace. And yeah, I understand not wanting conflict, but there comes a point where you have to stand your ground. So I told her straight. She's staying, she's family, and this is her home now. That's not changing. After that, the floodgates opened. More texts, more calls. Some cousins said they weren't coming around anymore. One of them even used gas prices as an excuse. Like, really? Suddenly your tank's empty because Grace is here? It was all just noise, people picking sides without saying they were. My wife and I stayed up late one night, just trying to talk through it. She was frustrated, heartbroken even, not because she regretted taking Grace in. We never regretted that, but because it felt like our family was shrinking around us. In the end, we agreed. If giving Grace a stable home meant losing a few people along the way, then so be it. She deserved to feel like she belonged, and if others couldn't see that, that was their problem. Of course, Grace noticed a shift. She wasn't blind. One evening, she came up to me, quiet, unsure. Is it because of me that they're not coming around? It hit me hard. I didn't want to lie to her. It's not your fault, Grace. Some people, they just don't get it. That's on them, not you. She gave a small nod, but I could see it. That same look she'd had the day we picked her up, that strange mixture of relief and uncertainty, like she was still waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I knew right then, we were just getting started. Things got weird after that, tense. We kept hosting like we always had, kept the calendar full, kept the doors open, but everything felt different. The crowd was thinner. The laughter didn't last as long. The energy? It was off. The folks who did show up acted like they were walking on glass, whispering in corners, shooting glances toward Grace when they thought we weren't looking. And Grace, she picked up on all of it. She'd barely touch her food at dinners, kept her head down. It was like she was bracing for someone to call her out, tell her she didn't belong, ask her to pack up and leave. We made sure she knew that wasn't ever going to happen, not on our watch. But then came my uncle's birthday. That's usually a big one. Whole family rolls in, kids running around the yard, music going, fire pit crackling. It's a staple of our year. Except this time, people started backing out. Lisa called, said her kids were sick. Uncle Tom mumbled something about a work thing. Aunt Linda, again, claimed she wasn't feeling well. One by one, they dropped off the list, and I wasn't buying it. They weren't skipping because they had to. They were skipping because Grace would be there. I was fuming, didn't want to let it show, but my wife caught it in my face, gave me a look that said, not now, not in front of her, so I bit my tongue. The day came, and barely a handful of people showed. We grilled, we set up a little fire, tried to make it feel normal. But the energy wasn't there. The tension hung in the air like smoke that wouldn't clear. Then John and Sophie showed up. First time they'd set foot on the property since Grace moved in, and the second I saw Sophie's face, I knew this wasn't a friendly drop-in. She was scanning the place like she was on patrol. Her eyes landed on Grace and stayed there, sharp and cold. I felt my chest tighten. My wife moved closer to Grace like she knew what was coming. John tried to act casual when they showed up, shaking hands, cracking a smile, making small talk with whoever was still around. But Sophie? She didn't waste a second. She made a beeline for me while I was at the grill, didn't even glance at the food, just crossed her arms and fixed me with that tight-lipped stare like I'd personally ruined her weekend. You know this isn't helping anyone, she said, all sharp edges. I kept flipping the burgers like I didn't know what she meant. What's not helping? She let out this frustrated little huff, like she was talking to a kid who was pretending not to understand. Grace, you keeping her here, it's not doing her any favors, and it's tearing the family apart. That was enough. I set down the spatula and looked her square in the eye. No, Sophie, we're giving her a place to stay because she needs it, that's all. She didn't back off. Well, John, and I think it's time she moved on. She's 18. She needs to learn to stand on her own. I could feel the heat rising, and it wasn't coming from the grill. Stand on her own? I said, you two kicked her out with no plan, no help, nothing. That's not teaching her independence, Sophie. That's just leaving her behind. A few people nearby started to quiet down. I didn't look, but I could feel the eyes on us. Some folks slowing their steps, others pretending they weren't listening, but definitely listening. Grace was still out by the barn helping my wife. Thankfully, she didn't need to hear this. Not like this. Sophie leaned in like she was doing me a favor, voice low but sharp. John, and I don't appreciate you getting in the middle of our family business. I didn't move an inch. Well, maybe if you treated her like family in the first place, I wouldn't have to. That was it. She threw her hands up, muttered something about how stubborn I was, and stormed off toward the house. Not 5 minutes later, John came over. His tone was cooler, but not by much. He glanced around, made sure no one was in earshot. You know, we're not trying to be the bad guys here, he said, like that would smooth things over. But Grace needs to move on. This isn't helping her grow. I took a slow breath, tried to keep my voice level. Then answer me this. I said, if you really believe that, why didn't you help her before it got to this point? Why wait until she turned 18 and toss her out? He shifted on his feet like the ground had gotten uneven beneath him. It's not that simple. No, I said, I think it is, and until she's ready to go. On her terms, she's staying here. He didn't argue, just gave me this look like I betrayed him somehow, then walked off without another word. The rest of the night limped along after that. People tried to pretend nothing had happened, but the tension was baked into every conversation. Every laugh that didn't quite land. John and Sophie left early. A few others trickled out soon after. Later, while we were cleaning up, my wife pulled me aside. You did the right thing, she said. Don't let them make you feel like you didn't. I nodded, but deep down it still felt like I was stuck in the middle of a mess that didn't have a clean way out. And of course, Grace picked up on it. After most of the guests had cleared out, she came over while we were folding up chairs. They left because of me, didn't they? She asked quietly. God, I hated that she even had to ask. It's not your fault, Grace. I told her, some people just can't handle it when things don't go their way. She didn't say anything after that, just went back to helping, moving plates and folding tablecloths, but I could see it on her face. She was carrying the weight of it, even if it wasn't hers to carry. The next few days were quiet. Grace stayed busy around the farm, helped feed the animals, painted the old shed out back, even helped my wife with the garden. We tried to keep the routine going like nothing had changed, but the silence from the rest of the family said otherwise. And then the text started again. A steady stream of just wanted to check in messages from people who hadn't said 2 words since the party. Everyone suddenly had a thought or opinion about the situation. Some of them dressed it up nice. We just want what's best for Grace. But we knew what they really meant. They wanted us to send her away. They wanted their version of normal back. One night, after the latest round of calls, I sat down with my wife and Grace at the kitchen table. Figured it was time we laid it all out, face to face. Listen, I said, I know this is a lot. I know it's not fair, and I hate that people are making you feel like this is your fault. Grace kept her eyes down, twisting her hands in her lap. Maybe if I wasn't here, she mumbled, things would go back to normal. I shook my head. No, this isn't on you. They're the ones making it complicated. You don't need to carry that. My wife leaned in then, her voice gentle but firm. You hear us, Grace? This is your home, for as long as you need it. Grace gave a small nod, but the doubt was still there, in her eyes, in her shoulders, in the way she didn't quite meet our gaze. And who could blame her? After everything she'd been through, it made sense that she wouldn't trust words right away. That was okay. We weren't just saying it. We were going to show her. And as the days rolled on, and the calls kept coming, I started to understand something more clearly than ever. This wasn't about who was right anymore. It wasn't about keeping peace in the family or smoothing over egos. It was about protecting someone who had been failed by the people who should have had her back. And I didn't care how messy it got. We weren't going to back down. Grace was staying with us, and we weren't about to give her up even if it meant going against half the family. After that awkward family dinner and the many messages from John, things on the farm began to get noticeably tense. Grace was still trying to help, keeping up a cheerful demeanor, but I could see it all starting to weigh on her. My wife and I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy. But when the phone doesn't go silent because of family squabbles, it becomes almost impossible. Then out of the blue, Uncle Tom stopped by the farm. He usually stays out of all arguments, doesn't pick sides, and tries not to get involved. So his unannounced visit spoke volumes about the seriousness of the situation. I invited him in. We sat down in the kitchen. My wife put the coffee on. For the first minutes, I could see that he fell out of place. He fidgeted nervously in his chair, didn't know where to start. I've been talking to John and Sophie. He began, scratching his neck. They're pretty worried about the whole Grace thing. I sighed heavily. I'd heard that before. So what now? I asked. He hesitated, then said, Look, they're going to get the whole family involved. They want to have some kind of family meeting and intervention to decide what to do about Grace. I clenched my jaw. A family meeting to decide what to do with Grace. Is she a project of the whole family? She's a living person. That's what I told them, Tom hastened to add. But they're sure. Grace must come back to them. They think if most of the relatives put pressure on you, you'll give in. It was like a punch in the gut. It's one thing to disagree with us personally. It's quite another to drag the whole family into this. That was below the belt. What, they want to vote? I grinned. A vote on whether a person could live where he was happy? Tom shrugged. Well, something like that. They think if the majority is on their side, you'll have no choice. My wife, who had been silent until then, finally intervened. That's nonsense. We're not in Parliament. Grace is staying here because she needs to, and kicking her out just because someone doesn't like it. We won't. Tom nodded, but still looked just as uncomfortable. I'm just passing it on. Don't get the wrong idea, but they're serious. The meeting will be at Aunt Linda's next week. It's clear this wasn't just a family dispute anymore. They were going to pressure us into submission. I clenched my fists under the table. So they're hoping that if they get a bunch of people together, they can squeeze us. I'm not saying it's right. Tom held up his hands. I just want you to be aware of it. My wife and I looked at each other. We'd been avoiding the conflict as long as we could, but now it was clear that we couldn't hide. This was getting out of hand. We had to decide whether to fight back or let them dictate terms. After Tom left, we sat in silence for a long time. Then my wife suggested, maybe we should talk to those of our relatives who supported us so that Grace would know that she was not alone, not for the sake of conflict, not to stand in opposition, but to make her feel that she had a support. Over the next few days, we did just that. We called Lisa, a cousin who had been on our side from the beginning. She, upon learning of the upcoming meeting, was outraged. This is ridiculous. She said, they act like Grace is some kind of problem to be solved. You have her, and that's the best thing that could have happened to her. They understand that perfectly well. They called the others. Some had doubts. Some didn't want to get involved. But there were those who said John and Sophie were overreacting. They promised to come to Aunt Linda and stand up for them if the pressure started. Grace tried to stay calm, like it didn't affect her, but I could see it was affecting her. One night, while we were feeding the animals, she did ask, Is it true that they're going to a meeting because of me? I nodded. Yes, it's true, but we're not going to let them make you do anything you don't want to do. She looked down, kicking dust with her boot. I just don't understand why. I mean, they didn't care before. Why does it suddenly matter so much now? I put my hand on her shoulder. It's not about you, Grace. It's about them. They don't like that we made a decision without their approval, and now they want to control it. She sighed quietly. I don't want to be the cause of more trouble. You're not the problem, I said firmly. They're the problem, and we're with you. And we'll be here for you, no matter what happens. We're here to talk about what's best for Grace, John said, his voice measured but rehearsed. I glanced at him, then quietly asked, "What's best for Grace, or what's best for you?" Sophie jumped in. "This isn't about us. It's about giving Grace a stable future, and we believe that means coming back home." My wife folded her arms, steady. "You mean back to the place that pushed her out?" John didn't answer that. Instead, he launched into something about how the family needed to come together, how this whole thing was dividing everyone. He was trying to make it sound like he and Sophie were just caught in the middle, like they were the ones being hurt by all of this. A few cousins murmured in agreement, but most just stayed silent. It was clear they'd done a lot of groundwork before this meeting. Then Lisa stood up. Her voice was calm, but firm. "This whole thing is absurd. Grace has a home. She's safe. She's loved. And she's doing better than she has in a long time. If you really cared about her, you'd be supporting her, not trying to pull her back into something she's trying to move past." A few people nodded, but the room stayed mostly quiet. John kept going, saying we were isolating Grace, making her rely on us too much. I knew it wasn't true, but he said it with such certainty that I could see a few people start to question things. That's when I stood up. "This isn't a group decision," I said. "Grace is an adult. She's already made her choice. We're not here to argue about it. If you don't like it, that's something you'll have to deal with." The room fell quiet. After a moment, people started slowly getting up, some with quiet nods of support, others avoiding eye contact entirely. John and Sophie stayed seated, tense. "We're not done here," John muttered as we turned to go. I looked back and said, "We are." On the drive home, Grace looked more at ease than she had in weeks. We all knew this wasn't the end of it, but at least she knew, without a doubt, that we were standing with her. As we got closer to the start of her university classes, things began to settle down. Grace kept working on the farm, kept helping out, and you could tell she was getting into a rhythm. My wife and I tried to keep the atmosphere positive, thinking maybe once Grace started school and had her own routine, things with the rest of the family might cool off. Then my phone rang. It was John. I hesitated but picked up. Maybe, just maybe, he wanted to talk things through. Maybe he realized how much all this had been weighing on Grace. I should have known better. "Hey," I said, keeping it neutral. No greeting from him. "I heard Grace is in therapy now," he said, clipped. "Yeah," I replied. "She's been through a lot. She needs space to talk things out." He scoffed. "I don't know why you think that's necessary. We raise her just fine. She doesn't need therapy." I took a breath. "John, she was kicked out of her home. She's been carrying a lot. Having someone to talk to is the healthiest thing she could do right now." "That's not support," he snapped. "You're just encouraging her to play the victim." That one hit me. I tried to stay calm, but my voice got sharper. "No one's playing anything. She's doing the work to move forward. And if you can't see that, maybe the problem isn't her." Silence on the other end. I could almost hear him clenching his jaw. "You've changed," he finally said. "You used to care about family. Now you're the one dividing us." That stung. We'd built this place, this life, for family, holidays, reunions, open doors, but now, somehow, I was the one being painted as the one tearing it apart. "I haven't stopped caring," I said. "I'm doing what's right. Grace has a place here. That's not going to change, whether you like it or not." He hung up. I sat there, staring at the wall for a while. I wasn't angry, not exactly, just tired, like everything we were doing for Grace, everything we believed in, was being twisted into something else. Later that night, I sat down with my wife. We talked about what was coming, about how Grace's life was about a shift with school starting. Maybe once people saw that she was okay, thriving even, they'd finally let it go. My wife had an idea. We should have one small gathering, just a quiet dinner, nothing big. Just the family members who'd stood by us through it all, a way to show Grace that she was supported, not just by us, but by a few others too, that she wasn't alone. So we planned something simple. Good food, close company, no speeches, just love, just family, the kind that shows up. The night of the dinner started off perfectly. A few cousins, along with some aunts and uncles, showed up. It felt nice. And for a brief moment, everything seemed like it was back to normal, like the old days. Grace was in good spirits, chatting and laughing with everyone. It was one of those rare nights where we could almost forget about the chaos and just enjoy ourselves. But of course, that didn't last. As we were finishing up dinner, I saw John's car coming up the driveway. The moment I spotted him, I knew this wasn't going to be a friendly visit. He hadn't set foot on the farm since everything had gone down. So seeing him now was definitely a bad omen. He stepped out of the car, Sophie beside him, and the tension was almost palpable as they walked toward the house. A few of my cousins exchanged uneasy glances, and Grace went quiet, her smile fading the second she saw them. My wife and I locked eyes, and I knew we were both thinking the same thing. This wasn't going to end well. John didn't waste a second. He marched right up to us and, with everyone watching, said, "We need to talk now." I kept my cool, tried to remain civil. "All right, let's step aside and talk in private." He shook his head, a dismissive smirk on his face. No, we're doing this here in front of everyone." Sophie stood next to him, her arms crossed, looking like she was ready to pick a fight. I glanced over at Grace, who had a look of dread on her face. I could tell she was bracing for the worst, and honestly, so was I, but I wasn't about to let John make a scene in front of everyone. I crossed my arms and said, "Fine, what's this about?" John took a deep breath, clearly preparing for a speech. "We've thought about this a lot, and we think it's time for Grace to come home." The room went completely silent. I noticed a few people exchanging confused glances. Grace looked stunned, like she didn't even know how to respond. I was just as shocked as she was after all this time. Now, they suddenly wanted her back? Sophie stepped forward, nodding, and added, "We think it's best for her to come back and live with us. We want to fix things as a family." Grace stayed silent, staring down at her plate. My wife gently placed a hand on her shoulder, offering her a reassuring squeeze. I didn't know exactly what John and Sophie were trying to pull, but I wasn't about to let them pressure Grace into going back. "We've been through this already, John. She's staying here." John's expression turned hard. "We don't want her here anymore. She belongs with us." Finally, Grace spoke up, her voice soft but resolute. "I don't want to go back." She looked up at her father for the first time, her gaze steady. "You only want me back now because you don't want to look bad in front of everyone." Sophie's face twisted with anger. "How dare you talk to us like that?" Sophie snapped. Grace didn't flinch. "But you kicked me out. You didn't care what happened to me or where I went. Now you're here, acting like everything's fine." John's expression was unreadable, but I could see his patience wearing thin. "We're your family, Grace. You can't just run away from that." My wife stood up, her voice calm but firm. "She's not running away from anything. She's trying to start fresh, and we're here to support her." Sophie rolled her eyes. "Oh, so now you two think you're saviors, huh? This is why the family is falling apart. You keep interfering." That was it. I couldn't hold back anymore. "Interfering? You kicked her out. We gave her a place to stay, because that's what family is supposed to do." John shook his head and looked around at everyone, like he was trying to rally support. "This isn't how it's supposed to be. Grace belongs with us. You need to stop undermining that." I felt my fists clenching, but I forced myself to stay composed. "Grace is staying here, and that's final." John opened his mouth like he was about to argue, but then something shifted. He stared at me for a moment, as if weighing his next words. Finally, he turned to Grace. "Fine, stay here, but don't expect us to keep trying. We're done with that." With that, he turned and walked out, Sophie following close behind him. The silence that followed was heavy, and I could feel the weight of everyone processing what had just happened. Grace sat still, staring at her plate. I could see tears starting to well up in her eyes, but she didn't say anything. My wife and I didn't push her to talk. We simply sat beside her, letting her know without words that we were there for her, no matter what. It wasn't the resolution we had hoped for, but at least now Grace knew who had her back, and in the end, that was all that mattered.